I had returned home to the U.S. from the war after the Army got the well-earned victory in the fight with a Soviet-Russian terrorist organization led by the man named Vladimir Markov. The Russians knew that Markov's group was just a handful of terrorists, and not a true representation of the Russian country, so they gladly allied themselves with us to help put an end to his terror. I pulled into the driveway and got out of the Humvee, wearing my standard U.S. Army uniform with the U.S. flag on my shoulder to show my country's support. I opened the front door of my house and walked in, dropping my duffel bag on the floor as I did. I changed out of the Army uniform into a pair of jeans and a t-shirt, before sitting down on the couch and taking a deep breath, finally being able to relax after having been stationed in multiple countries for the last couple years. I put on the television and decided to watch some Escape the Backrooms to decompress from the long military campaign against Markov and his group. The videos were pretty relaxing and provided me a lot of good entertainment. I went into the kitchen and began to make myself a meal consisting of a steak with a side of French fries, a bowl of salad, and a bottle of water to wash it all down with. I was able to savor the meal a lot, as it had been a very long time since I'd had a meal that wasn't an Army-supplied MRE. I sat myself back down on the couch with my meal and began to eat it while paying attention to the television, the combination of the meal and the Backrooms video providing a sense of calm, comfort, and relaxation to me. After I finished eating, I took my dishes to the sink and gave them a quick rinse before putting them in the dishwasher. I was taught to always clean up after myself while I was in the Army, and it was an effective habit in the long run. I went upstairs to my bedroom after turning the television off and began to get ready to take a nap. My bed looked like the most comfortable thing possible after being deployed for a very long time, and I laid down in it and quickly fell asleep. I slept for about an hour before I slowly began to wake up once again. I groggily sat up from the bed as I rubbed my eyes, before walking over to the window in my room and staring out of it at my neighborhood. I pushed open the window and sat down on the ledge of it, taking a deep breath of the fresh outdoor air. I relished the feeling, as the air outside was far more fresher than the air I was breathing on the battlefield, and it was much more relaxing. While sitting by the window, I found myself wondering what I was going to be doing now that I was home. I had become so used to the military lifestyle after doing it for so long, and now that the war was over, I wasn't sure what I was going to be doing with the rest of my life now. I sat there by the window, pondering for a bit. I thought about a lot of options I could have for the future. I thought about staying in the military. Maybe I could get a job or something. The possibilities seemed almost endless, so many options. I suddenly had a thought pop into my head. I remembered the fan game called The Joy of Creation Reborn. I'd played it a lot while relaxing on my off time when fighting and campaigning against Markov, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Maybe I could play it again and unwind a bit more. The thought also occurred to me about how cool it would be to actually visit the Joy of Creation house in real life. I could use my military-issued M60 light machine gun, which was the exact same gun in my favorite military game, Call of Duty Black Ops, and my issued Glock 18 against the ignited animatronics that would be roaming the location. I could only imagine how fun it would be. I decided then to give actually doing that a try later that night. It sounded like a good idea to me. I got up from the window ledge and grabbed both of my weapons from a safe, before making sure they both had magazines in them, ready to be used. I planned to head to the Joy of Creation house at 10 p.m. that night, as it was currently only 12 mid-morning after waking up from the nap. I wanted to wait a while so I could fully wake up and get more prepared for what was to come, as I knew it wouldn't be entirely like a standard Call of Duty mission, even though I was well equipped. I spent the rest of my day relaxing, while also getting ready for the night. I washed my standard U.S. Army uniform, made sure all of my weapons were in their proper order, checked my ammo count, and made sure I was as prepared as I could have been. I ate dinner at 8 p.m., knowing that I'd probably be unable to eat once inside the location, and not being sure how soon I'd be able to eat again once starting my mission. I took a shower and freshened up once dinner was finished, wanting to be in perfect physical and health condition prior to entering the location with potential hostile animatronics inside. I put on my military uniform and uniform hat, and grabbed my M60 light machine gun and Glock 18 handgun, doing a final check of all of my gear to ensure I was as prepared as I could be for what was to come once I got to the location. I made my way out to the U.S. military Crusader Jeep that I'd been provided by the Army, and climbed in, getting comfortable behind the wheel before starting the engine and beginning the drive to the location. I backed the military Jeep out of the driveway and began making my way down the road, the engine roaring as I pressed the gas pedal, and began driving down the road toward my destination that was the Joy of Creation house. I turned onto the main road and drove down it, heading south toward the Joy of Creation house. I was on high alert for anything that could pose a threat on the way, and I was ready for anything that could be waiting for me once I got to the house. The drive down the main road south lasted about 15 minutes until it entered the woods. The woods were dark and ominous in the night, especially with the full moon shining overhead. I wasn't scared, however. The woods reminded me of jungle warfare that the Army put me through. I continued down the main road through the forest, the trees looming on either side of the road, the headlights of the Jeep lighting up the area in front of me. After 8 minutes of driving through the forest, I came to a dirt road with lamps on wooden posts. It must have led to the Joy of Creation house, as it wasn't any standard dirt path inside the forest. I turned the cruiser Jeep down the dirt path, which was lit up by the lamps on the wooden poles on the side of the road. It was getting very close to the Joy of Creation house now. The drive down the dirt road lasted 10 minutes before I finally arrived at the house. I parked the military Jeep on the side of the road up against one of the trees, and climbed out of the Jeep, holding my military-issued weapons and looking at the house in front of me. I took a look at the house, and I had to admit that it looked pretty nice, even for a house in the middle of the forest. It kind of reminded me of my own suburban home, in a way. The exterior of the house was almost exactly like my own house, but with a few different details and shapes that made it stand out. The fact that it was in the middle of the forest kind of put me off a bit, though. I wondered why a house of this caliber would be placed this deep into the forest. The potential risks for the house being out here was huge. A strong enough storm could cause a tree to fall on the house or start a fire. It was like whoever owned the property took a giant risk. I shrugged at the thought and continued to examine the house and the outside surroundings. I got my M60 light machine gun loaded and ready, before making my way up to the front door of the house and peering inside through one of the windows to see if I could spot anything inside. I got my M60 light machine gun loaded and ready, before making my way up to the front door of the house and peering inside through one of the windows to see if I could spot anything inside. The inside of the house was incredibly dark, so dark you couldn't even see your own hand in front of your face. I could only assume that a power outage caused the lights to go out, or the power was cut off. I entered the front door and made my way into a corridor that had 2 wall lamps illuminating the area, with an old small radio on a shelf playing some smooth jazz music, the soft sound of the music echoing quietly throughout the hallway. The music sounded like it was from the 1940s and had a slow, relaxing rhythm to it. I was a bit confused as to how this old radio was on, but I didn't question it too much, as I was more focused on the fact that it was playing music that I enjoyed. It was like this radio knew that I liked 1940s slow, smooth jazz music. I was making my way toward the door that led into the main part of the house, when a thunderstorm suddenly rolled in. I could hear the sound of the pouring rain on the roof and the forest surroundings, as well as the sound of loud thunderclaps and bright flashes of lightning. I was actually glad that a storm had rolled in, as it created a good ambiance for this mission, almost like in the game. The sound of the rain, thunder, and lightning, combined with the overall dark setting of the house, created the perfect setting for what was to come. I decided then to treat this mission as an investigation, rather than just going in guns blazing, as I wanted to observe and find out what was really going on with this house, and why it was abandoned. I entered the main part of the house, which was dark and foggy. I turned on the flashlight on my M60 light machine gun, so that I could see in the dark area, and observe my surroundings so I didn't accidentally run into a wall or object in the darkness. The house was surprisingly put together very well, and the wooden flooring was clean and organized. The only strange difference was that the layout of the house was slightly confusing and resembled a small maze with different rooms in random spots. I noticed a room that looked like a small living room at the end of the hallway in front of me. I turned and looked down the other hallway to the left, which was a dead end. The doorway I came through was at a corner that the hallway turned at, and I couldn't see anything down that hallway, so I started exploring the areas near me. I suddenly saw a light shining from a corridor in the center, so I went to check it out. Peeking around the corner, I saw that the light was coming from a lamp in the middle of a room. As I entered the room, I noticed that it appeared to be a small storage room with a couple of shelves. One of the shelves held an odd-looking wheel, like one you'd find on an old film camera. I continued on down the hallway and turned another corner into another hallway. As I was walking, I spotted Ignited Freddy walking, his joints creaking with every move he made as he shuffled down the hallway. I followed behind Ignited Freddy as he patrolled the house, curiously following him, wanting to see what he was doing. It seemed that he was simply patrolling every corner of the house. I continued to follow behind Ignited Freddy as I watched him make his way around the house, checking every room, patrolling the hallways, and making sure everything looked all right. All of a sudden, Ignited Freddy turned around, saw me, and roared loudly before beginning to chase after me at a rather quick pace. I ran through the halls, trying to find some way to avoid him. The chase lasted for 5 minutes, and I could hear Ignited Freddy creaking and groaning behind me as I made my way through the halls. Eventually, I grabbed my M60 and turned to fire a few bullets at Ignited Freddy, striking him with the onslaught of bullets and making him drop to the floor. Ignited Freddy collapsed to the floor, the onslaught of bullets having enough damage to it that it fully powered him down. I approached the body, just to make sure that the animatronic was 100% deactivated. After making sure that Ignited Freddy was fully deactivated, I went back to exploring the house, checking different rooms, hallways, and even hiding spots to see what I could find, especially with the storm still continuing outside. I made my way through a doorway that led into what appeared to resemble a small home office, the desk in the room looking as if it hadn't been used for years. The home office was quite organized compared to the rest of the house, but it looked like it was a bit cramped, especially around the desk, which has a bunch of papers and other items sitting around it. I walked through the second doorway of the room into another hallway, still holding my machine gun at the ready, just in case I needed to fire at another threat. The storm was still raging outside, the sound of the rain and thunder adding to the ambient atmosphere of the mission. For another 10 minutes, I continued to explore the area, making sure I looked in every room and hallway that I found, making sure I wasn't being followed by another animatronic. Eventually, I found another door, and when I went to open it, I saw that it was a staircase that led downward. I slowly made my way down the steps into the mysterious and dark part of the house. When I got to the bottom, I discovered that I was in the basement, and I instantly remembered that this was where Ignited Bonnie was going to be roaming around. And I also remembered that he was a lot more aggressive and faster than Ignited Freddy had been. I prepared my M60, ready to fire when I would encounter Ignited Bonnie. I knew that it was a risky move, as he was faster and more dangerous than Freddy had been, but I was willing to risk it. As I began to explore the basement, I realized that the halls and corridors here were the same from the game, making it slightly easier to understand where I was at, as I continued to look for Ignited Bonnie. As I continued to check different hallways and corridors in the basement, I noticed that there were lamps on the walls that provided just enough light to see, and 3 different places I could hide if Ignited Bonnie was coming towards me. I saw a red light moving at the end of the hall, before Ignited Bonnie slowly began to make his way down the hall. I remembered that he had no face, or right arm for that matter, just like Withered Bonnie from the second FNF game. I carefully made my way down another hallway, getting away from the spot Ignited Bonnie was patrolling earlier, making sure to be as quiet as possible. I continued to explore the rest of the basement, occasionally peeking around corners to make sure Ignited Bonnie wasn't sneaking up on me. I continued to explore the basement and soon spotted Ignited Bonnie again, this time as he was walking around and patrolling the halls. I noticed that his walking pace was different from Ignited Freddy's, and was even faster than him as well. As I was watching him, I suddenly noticed that he turned around and had spotted me, his empty eye sockets staring directly at me now as he began to charge in my direction, walking at a faster speed. I started to run down the hallway away from Ignited Bonnie, my heart pounding as I could hear him closing the distance between us. I was chased through the basement for 5 minutes, before I dashed for the stairs and climbed up back to the first floor, with the sound of Ignited Bonnie right behind me as I got to the top. I was being chased across the first floor by Ignited Bonnie, avoiding his grasp time and time again as he continued to pursue me relentlessly. The chase lasted for another 5 minutes, before I turned around and fired a couple bursts from my M60 at Ignited Bonnie, the bullets having enough stop the animatronic in its tracks for a few seconds. Ignited Bonnie collapsed to the floor, the bullets having damaged him enough to power him down again, effectively shutting him down for a little bit. I decided that one round wasn't enough, so I shot Ignited Bonnie in the face a few more times, trying to make sure that he would really stay down this time. I suddenly felt my phone vibrate, the feeling making me pause for a second as it went off, breaking the eerie silence of the mission. I checked my phone and saw weather alerts that mentioned that storm outside had turned into a possible severe thunderstorm, with the risk of damaging winds, and even a chance of there being tornadoes. The weather report had me really nervous, and I decided to completely skip the locations where Ignited Chica and Ignited Foxy were at, not wanting to be stuck at the house for days because of some bad weather outside. I quickly left the house in a mad dash and ran out the front door towards the military Crusader Jeep, the rain and wind already starting to pick up by the time I was halfway towards the vehicle. I got to the Jeep, jumped into the driver's seat and quickly slammed the door shut and started the engine. I turned the Jeep around back on the dirt road, which had become a mud patch by this point from all the rain, but the military Jeep's tires were equipped to get through muddy terrain as they cut through the mud with ease. As I continued to drive down the dirt path, I heard a large tree branch snap and fall behind the Jeep, and I noticed the wind had suddenly gotten stronger, now starting to rock the Jeep a little as it drove onward. I was nervous as I saw the main road was much closer, the wind now howling and rocking the Jeep as I continued driving, the trees around the road bending and swaying from the windy weather. I got back onto the main road and turned the Jeep north, driving as fast as I safely could with the bad weather, going between 60-70 miles an hour on the empty road. I kept a close eye on the trees along the road, watching them to ensure that none of them fell onto the street or right in front of the Jeep, not wanting to get into a car accident in this weather. After another 10 minutes, I eventually exited the forest and came out into the open fields, heading towards the main road that would lead me to the suburban neighborhood that my house was at. I turned into the neighborhood, seeing many of the houses had the lights turned on, as everyone was at home and in shelter due to the bad weather. I quickly parked the Jeep in front of my house, before jumping out and running towards my house as fast as I could, wanting to get away from the bad weather and be back in the comfort of home. I took a deep breath when I shut the door behind me, happy that I was back home and now safe from whatever weather was happening outside. I went upstairs to my room and took off my military outfit, changing it out for some more comfortable pajamas, happy to be out of that uniform for a little bit. I had enjoyed the time at the Joy of Creation house, and I had been happy being able to investigate and do my mission like how I was taught during my days in basic and military training. I laid in bed listening to the storm, with the wind and rain pounding against the house, and watching some TV for a bit, still slightly on edge since the storm was a severe thunderstorm. I kept my fingers crossed mentally, hoping that the storm wouldn't get worse than what it was at already as I continued to watch TV. I watched some TV for a little while before ultimately deciding to go to sleep, and I slowly dozed off and drifted to sleep. I slept comfortably for a while, my hopes that the storm would die die down, remaining on my mind as I slowly fell asleep, dreaming of what may happen tomorrow.